Hi everyone, my name is Dileshka Erdley. I'm the project coordinator for Jordan and Brooke K-12 educators. At Jordan and Brooke, we focus on providing social emotional learning integrated into our online academic tutoring sessions because we believe in a holistic approach to education. Today is the second episode of our mental wellness series with our special guest, Sue O'Callaghan, a twice published author, public speaker, and mother of four. Sue is an inspiration and a trauma responsive consultant providing education programs, workshops for parents, schools, and frontline responders. She's an experienced trauma therapist and founded Teenage Toolbox in 2013. Following her work in UK maximum security prisons, her knowledge and understanding of trauma and resilience have been heavily influenced by over 40 years of work with not only the incarcerated, but with teenagers in schools throughout Singapore, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. She is renowned with her work for parents and teens through self-harming behavior, addiction, suicidation. She is also a successful couples counselor with an attachment-based focus. She speaks candidly about her personal experience through complex PTSD, transformation, and post-traumatic growth. Sue, you have extensive experience in both mental health and trauma fields. Based on your experiences, what are the most common mental health challenges students face today? And how can parents and educators look for signs to identify them more early on?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. It's such a great privilege to be here. In my work, because I work in predominantly the area of trauma, the signs I normally see would be anxiety, would be depression. I focus on self-harming behaviours and eating disorders. But we also see a lot of social anxiety. We see many pathologized behaviours such as diagnosis ADHD, OCD, and a lot of heavy medication as well. But I think if I was to summarise everything into one box, I would say that the root of all diagnosed behaviours or manifesting behaviour is actually a dysregulated nervous system. So if we look at dysregulation, we know the individual is under threat in some way, or they have an absence of safety in their life. So we would say anxiety, depression, self-harm, they're all behaviours that stem from a dysregulated nervous system. And what concerns me, I guess, in today's society is that particularly our young people are constantly exposed to threat because of use of the media, social, the internet, the sharing of information. And if you look at global pandemics, mass vaccination programs, global warming, climate change, Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, there's so much threat our children are exposed to. And the autonomic nervous system is a really clever system in the body to keep us safe. And so if we go into threat, the body will either go into high anxiety to shift us into a mobilized state to move away from threat, or it will shut us down to say, go to bed and sleep and recover. So our bodies are really clever. And I would give an example. We see many people, many young children diagnosed with ADHD today. And as a trauma response, I would say, if a child is exposed to an external situation that's threat and it's too overwhelming for the child, the healthy response of the body is to shut down, it's to dissociate, it's to say, that's too overwhelming, I'm going to go into my safe space inside. And also the hyperactivity is a response to remove yourself from threat. It's to run away or to be in hypervigilance state with your five senses alert to the sounds and the smells and what you're seeing as a threat. So I would say in an attention deficit or a hyperactive state, the body's working really well. It's not a faulty body, it's not a faulty behaviour. And I think your question is a really valid one. What can parents look out for in terms of signs? So I would say that if your child is withdrawing, if they're in a hypervigilant state, if they're emotionally dysregulated, they're trying to communicate an unmet need, worry over excessive fear, concentration problems, impulsivity, over-focus on some areas of their life. Social withdrawal is a really big one. Secrecy, often surrounds self-harming behaviours because there's so much stigma associated with self-harm. And we have to remember as well that self-harm is just a means for a child or an adult to find a way to regulate their nervous system. And many parents, rightfully so, very frightened if they discover their child is self-harmed. But when I work with a child, I don't work to stop the behaviour. I welcome the behaviour because it's a survival behaviour. It's not a behaviour that's destructive in many ways to the child. I need to survive. This pain is so intense, or the emotional dysregulation is so intense. So what can I do to survive? So I honour the child for finding something to survive. And if it was something like cutting, I would call it Clara and say, well, Clara's a present person in your life. She's a best friend at the moment. She helps you. She helps pain relief. So what can we do to understand what Clara needs? And so we look at the underlying need always. We don't look at the behaviour. And once we reduce the shame by welcoming Clara onto the scene as maybe the child's best friend or only friend, the shame reduces and often disappears, and then the cutting will diminish quite quickly because we're not trying to eradicate it. So I think parents intuitively know when there's something wrong with their child, and they often override it, or they often push it aside, or they say it's too much work pressure. But I would say to parents, your gut instinct or what's been given to you to survive in the wild, that's what animals have to survive. Don't ever override your gut feeling. If you think there's something wrong with your child, there probably is something. And we want to address what it is. So the earlier a parent can get support, and that's by open conversation in the family, seeking professional support, getting a therapist or counsellor on board, or even going to parent education classes, the sooner the better.
Thank you, Sue, for that answer. I think it truly will help a lot of educators and parents become more vigilant and watch out for early signs of mental distress. And this could even potentially save a child's life, especially if they're suicidal. So thank you so much for your answer. Moving on to our next question. What are some of the most common misconceptions about self-harm, anxiety, depression, and dysregulation? And how can parents and educators address these misconceptions so they can better support teens?
Thank you for that question. Firstly, can we just recognise how hard it is for parents and educators at the moment? You know, the mental health crisis, I think we're in a pandemic globally of mental health crisis. So I just want to honour parents and educators and just say, you know, we're not trained or equipped. It doesn't come as part of our package. So to recognise and honour what you go through is the first thing. The second thing is the most common misconception for me is that the behaviour is the problem. So we've always looked at behaviour therapy, and we've always looked at a top-down approach. By top-down, I mean we address the thinking. But actually, we work in trauma with a bottom-up approach, which is if I'm dysregulated, I have a somatic sensation. So my heart is racing, my breathing's increased, I feel really tense. And so we work with the body and say what's happening in the body. Now, any behaviour comes as a result of that hypervigilant state, tension, disconnection. So for me, if I look at a behaviour which is self-harm, it's an eating disorder, it's a temper tantrum, it's a rage, it's a child that's isolated, the behaviour is telling me something. For me, the behaviour is never wrong. So trauma therapy gets to the root of what's underneath. And I say, if you've got an apple tree and it's bearing bad apples, we don't want to just chop the apples off because they're going to keep growing. So we need to look at the roots. We need to look at the soil the tree's in and see what's happening underneath. And I would say one of the best therapies I work with for parents to connect with a child where the behaviour is not acceptable, and we normally punish the behaviour or we put consequences in place for a temper tantrum or throwing something around the room, or parents often shout at their child because they're so hurt when they see self-harm. I say, if we can just park the behaviour and we use a method that I absolutely love, it's called PACE, P-A-C-E. P is to be playful. So if I say to a child, why did you do that? I'm making an insinuation what they've done is wrong. If I change my wording into, I'm really curious why you did that, then I'm opening up to discussion the possibilities of non-judgment. It's neither right nor wrong. I'm just curious, I want to open it up. So it opens the possibility of discussion. If you say to a child, why did you do that? They feel threatened already. And that's adding on to the original threat. So P is for playfulness. Be playful. A is accepting the behavior. So we totally accept the behavior. We don't acknowledge it's okay if they've hit their sibling or they've smashed something in the house, but we're accepting the behavior has a cause root underneath it. C is to be curious about it, and E is to be the empath. And so by forming a really healthy connection with the child, which is not judgmental, it's not forming an opinion about it to be right or wrong, but to be curious and playful with the child and open up what's going on for them, we can often get to the root of what's going on underneath. And I think that's really important, so that we form a healthy connection with the child. We can then communicate with the child. But where there's a breakdown because the child is already feeling in threat, hence the behavior, if there's an insinuation of behavior is wrong or consequence, we're adding increased threat to the child and they're going to withdraw even more. And I see this again and again. If a parent, for example, because I predominantly work with self-harm, a natural response for a parent is to go into the child's bedroom and to go through everything to find anything they might be using to harm themselves. And of course, we honour that's a healthy response, because I say to parents, remove sharp blades and objects from the house, remove tools that are dangerous, and lock away medication. And that generally is a rule for teenagers anyway, because we don't know when they're going to go into dysregulated states. So it's not just the self-harmers. But I would say also, if you're going to go into a child's bedroom and go through their things, they're going to feel a lack of safety, because that is their safe space. And we look at a safety plan, which is who's your safe person, where's your safe space to go, and a child will always say my bedroom if I can shut my door. And the third is what's a safe routine. So I say to parents, have a conversation with your child to say, a lot of parents will go through the bedroom to try and find blades. That's what I want to do. But I'm not going to, it's your safe space. Because I say to a parent, if a child's going to self-harm, they're going to do it anyway. So better to have clean objects than rusty blades and so on. But to have conversations with your child, to be really open and say, I understand something's going on for you right now. I don't know what it is, and I'm here if you want to talk. There's a therapist we can go and see. But also, in the absence of you wanting to communicate with me, I just want you to know home is such a safe space. Your bedroom is such a safe space. I'm not going to invade that space. So what you're doing is using the word safety. You're creating more of an element of safety to reduce the shame, and also to bring a balance with the threat of the nervous system. And then it's up to the professional to actually work with a dysregulated nervous system and see what's going on. So it's really forming that compassionate, curious connection with your child, where there's safety for the communication.
Yes, thank you, Sue, for that answer. I think that was really interesting. I learned a lot from everything that you shared right now. And even the pace concept, I absolutely love that, because like you said, I feel many parents focus on the behavior without thinking what's behind the behavior, what's the root of the behavior. Because we can sort out the behavior, but it could be a short-term effect. To really have a long-term impact, we need to sort out the root. And that's really great, the concepts that you've started in and helping students across Australia and New Zealand, UK, Singapore. I'm really happy to be able to talk to you today, because I'm definitely learning, and I can make an impact in other students' life just by learning from you today. And now coming into our final questions, how can parents navigate through challenges such as problems at work, their marriage, or past traumas that could minimize a negative impact on their children?
Yeah, that's such a big question, isn't it? If we just come to recognize, I'm a mother of 4, and the huge stresses that we face nowadays. And I think recognizing this is not a parent problem. I think the minute you give birth to a child and that child gets older, you also give birth to guilt as a parent. And I say to parents, part the guilt, because everybody, all of us do the best we can for our children in the circumstances we're in. We can always look back and say we could do it better. But I just want, first of all, parents just to try and park the guilt of parenting. That's such a crippling part of the job that we do, because we do always have the interests of our child at heart. Bearing in mind we're in really difficult situations. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, as I say, it's a global societal problem. It's not a parent problem. So we're living in a globalized society. We used to live in In New Zealand, we call it whānau, our tribe. And really, if we look at tribal populations, it's the community, it's the village that raises the child, it's the grandparents. It was never the parents. So the idea that we put all the stress of the children onto two parents or even one parent is not a normal, healthy concept at all. So then we've got urbanization, we've got high mortgage rates, high rent rates, loss of jobs, financial stress and worry. We've got intergenerational trauma. And this is huge, but what's really important is that the parents have got their own trauma. Most parents do carry some kind of trauma, either developmental trauma or intergenerational trauma or present trauma. What's really important is to understand the parents' trauma and struggles and adverse situations is really separate from the child's. And we want to put a brick wall in the middle and make sure parents have got their own support system in place, whether it be therapy, whether it be joining clubs or joining groups or becoming friends, extending the friendship circle. So they've got personal support outside. Mentor is really important, so that parents take responsibility for support, because most of us don't have grandparents and extended family on the scene to carry the weight and the burden, and we are too burdened ourselves. The second thing is, how can I extend the social connection for my child? Now, I always say trauma is the absence of safety. Attachment to healthy human beings, healthy attachment, is the presence of safety. So if we're separated in society, and we know isolation is the biggest cause of death nowadays, then we have caused attachment deprivation. We haven't got safe relationships. So the most important thing for the therapist is to find and to encourage ways for parents to re-establish social connection in the absence of family and whānau and tribe by creating friendship sets. It's play dates for children. It's actually joining clubs or sports facilities or places and communities, faith-based groups where we can actually have a sense of belonging and purpose and connection. Now, when you have healthy connection, ideally in the family, with that healthy connection with one or two parents, the parent will co-regulate the child. That means when the child hurts themselves, we soothe them, we encourage them, we say, let's rub the pain better, it really hurts. We allow the child to express the anger. We say, you're really angry, let's get the anger out of your body. Let's not say to them, go to your bedroom until you stop being angry, or I won't talk to you, or calm down. We say, there's big energy in your body, let's get it out of the body. And we don't say stop crying. We say the body's natural mechanism to release stress and sadness and grief is to cry. So I see you crying, let's get it out of your body. So if I can co-regulate a child, which is what happens in the therapy situation, parent situation, a teacher situation, then the child is soothed and they can be co-regulated back into calm and safety. In the absence of co-regulation, then the child is having to self-regulate, which is actually really difficult to do to calm ourselves down. If we have healthy co-regulation from parents in the evening and teachers at school, when the child is on their own, they can self-regulate and then come back. I say it's like an EV car, electric car. The car can go so far on its charge, it then needs to go back and plug in. So if the parent can allow the child to come back and plug in, and the teacher can allow the child to plug in, for the co-regulation, the child can self-regulate when they're on their own. In the absence of co-regulation, because we don't have the village anymore, when a child is having to self-regulate, and even the parent having to self-regulate without the support in place, what then happens is I need something to soothe the pain, numb the overwhelm, release, or actually avoid it. And that's where we get addictive traits. And this is what addiction is. It's soothing, it's numbing, it's releasing, and it's avoiding. And that's where the role of alcohol, narcotics, drugs, shopping addiction, consumer society, overwork will actually do that. So when we self-regulate, and self-harm comes in that place as well, and suicidation. So when we can't actually self-regulate anymore, that's when we opt for something else to do it for us. So when we see that as a sign in a child, if you know that your child's self-harming or there's suicidation or an overwhelm, we know we need to plug them in like the EV car. Who is it? So who can I talk to at school? Is it their dean? Is it their class teacher, their counsellor? And I think what's really important for parents also and teachers to understand is not to say to a child, go and talk to your dean or go and talk to the counsellor, because they might represent a threat to the child. If If the father's abused the child and has got a beard and the counsellor's got a beard, that's a threat. So we say to the child, is there someone at school you feel really safe to talk to? Would it be your English teacher? Would it be the counsellor? We give them choice and make them feel empowered. There's a really good book and it's called They F*** You Up. And it's a brilliant book because it talks about how we as parents mess up our children. I won't use the F word, but we do. And how our parents have done the same for us and how our children will go and do it for their children as well. And I think in today's society that's so dysregulated, there's so much disconnection, we feel that responsibility for messing up our children's lives. But I say there is support in place. There's amazing parenting classes. The parents we had did it with a very different style without the internet and social media. We're doing it for the first time. We've not been educated. I'd say, please go and join a parenting class. Go and meet a community of other parents as well. Have discussions, understand these are common problems that you're facing. But also get support for your child. Encourage them to find mentors. If you can't afford therapy, just that they can find an aunt or their best friend's mother or somebody else they can talk to outside of the family is really important. So there is really good support in place, and the internet's a place we can find as well to help often that we need.
Yes, definitely. So the internet is definitely a place that they can find support. And I think parents, when they have children that are struggling mentally, tend to neglect themselves and make the child their sole focus, and without realizing that they need to sort out themselves to truly help their child. So everything you shared today would definitely be helpful for any parents watching.
Yeah, it's so true, because many children that get sent to me, I work with family dynamic therapy, and it's often the parents that need support. And I say to them, look, I don't need to see your teenager. If I can work with you for some classes, I can give you tools and strategies to regulate your child. And they don't need to see me, because the minute a child sees a therapist or a counsellor, they understand they're the problem and the therapist has got the solutions. And I say that's not the case. This is about education. And even when it comes to my child's being diagnosed, because we pathologize a lot of behaviour, ADHD is just a symptom of something. Diagnosed with depression, it's just a symptom of just being in complete overwhelm and shutdown. Anxiety is a hypervigilant state. Well, why? So I tend to park the diagnosis and say what's going on underneath. And this is where parents can get a lot of support online as well.
And how can parents who have experienced trauma, such as strict upbringing, avoid passing on negative patterns, especially when they feel they had to overcompensate, which can lead to themselves getting stressed out and then their children becoming more spoiled?
Yeah, I think this is a big one. I mean, we use the word helicopter parenting, and I certainly think the way many parents manage nowadays is to book the children into activities and feel they're giving something, so the children's lives are highly organized and structured. And I think one tip parents could bear in mind is that boredom for children is a really important part of their development. To explore, to play, to be curious, to investigate, to experiment, to be creative. So when children are bored, they go into creativity. But if we book up and timetable and schedule every part of their day, they don't have the chance to go into creativity where they find a sense of purpose and relief. And we kind of think it's, well, if they do more sport or more exercise, so we book them into every sports facility there is. But actually, creativity and play and exploration are what they have in their younger years before they go into the school system, where they have to conform and be on a conveyor belt of expectations. So I think allowing children to create, to innovate is a huge part of what's missing in development today. So I say to parents, please, maybe a couple of activities, but allow boredom, because they will hang up, no screen time when this is your boredom time. Go and be bored, go and create, because that's when children used to do the most extraordinary things. Even if it's, to go and hang out with your friends, it's better than hanging out with your friends online. So could you please think about boredom as a parent, and think about when you were bored as a child, because we didn't have the internet. What did you do? That's the time you had most fun, and that's the time you innovated or built dens, or explored or experimented. But this is a really important part of childhood development. It's not happening. So park the hypervigilance. And even if it's you get a childminder to be with a child because you've normally booked an activity because you're not around, well then have a childminder in the house, a young teenager in the house, to be with them in the boredom, in the play, in the curiosity to find out and explore.
Yes. Thank you, Sue. Thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us on this podcast today. And I truly appreciate you taking your time to do this. If there are any parents or educators that are tuning in and you need help or your children need help, you can feel free to visit Teenage Toolbox, which will be linked down below. They have helpful resources and any information you need in order to get the help that you require. And you could even book a therapy session with Sue herself. I'm truly inspired by your mental health journey and all the information you shared with me today, Sue. And I look forward to seeing the greater impact you're going to create through Teenage Toolbox. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.